So in this one, I want to show you how to make these cool fragmented, shattered crystal type things. So here are some examples of where I've used this in my work, like stuff like this. Just being able to take basically any shape you want and just shatter it into this crystal glowing type thing. I'll show you how to set this up, how to shade it, all the materials and everything. It's all very easy. You don't need a good computer. It's highly customizable and it's just fun. This is one of the most fun things to do in Blender, I think. So here's how you do this. I'm in a new scene, so just empty. I've got a sky texture in here right now. This is my default. What I want to do first is just delete this, and I want a black background. This kind of stuff just always looks best in a dark environment, so that's what I'll start with. But do whatever you want. But for me, this is what I want. So let me disable this thing, not that thing, the floor. The floor is bugging me. Let me take this off. Floor. Okay. So for a demonstration, I'm just going to use a sphere to shatter first, just because it's going to be easy to see what's going on. But just know that you can do this with whatever shape you want. So I'll just add one of these. Let's just do, that's fine, default's fine. Let's go to solid view and let's work with this for now. So I'll just shade it smooth. And the basic technique is you want to just go to, you want to use cell fracture, because that's the easiest way to just shatter something. If you've never used that, let me show you what this is. So click on the object you want to shatter. Go to object up here, go down to quick effects, and then just click this button right here, cell fracture. That'll take you to this menu here. If you click off of this, it won't work. So just know that if you go back there, object, quick effects, cell fracture, just know that if you click outside of this box, it will cancel it. So just be careful when clicking. It'll also get rid of your settings. So just only click within this box when you're working here. So if I just don't touch anything and I just hit OK, this will run this procedure and it'll do this, and you'll get this kind of result, which is pretty good, but we can do a lot better, and I want to show you how to do that. The way to kind of shatter this from here, I'll show you the best settings to use in a minute, but the way to work with these pieces and see a bit easier what's going on is, there's a couple ways you can do it. I like to, since these are now all separate objects, what you can do is, it's already set the origin point to those individual objects, so you can actually just switch your transform pivot point to be individual origins. And now if I scale these on the individual origins, it'll just scale them individually. So that's kind of an easy way to see what's going on here. You can also just use effect only locations. So if I scale this normally, it'll do this with a median point on. But if I turn on effect only locations, now when I scale it, it'll kind of break this up this way. So that's another way you can manipulate these pieces. So I'll just do that to kind of show you how these different settings are going to affect our results here. So if I bring this out like this, the default settings are going to give you this kind of shape, but I want it to be, more crystally, more just cool, and we can do some like more interesting results if we mess with the settings a little bit more. So let's go back to object, quick effects, cell fracture. So remember, that last one was just the default settings. I didn't touch anything at all. The first thing that's going to have probably the biggest effect is this setting right here, recursion. What that means is if I turn this up, it'll shatter it into pieces, and then the higher this recursion setting is, the more it'll shatter the pieces that have already been shattered into even smaller pieces. So in other words, the more levels of division you'll get when you shatter it. So if I turn it up to 1, you'll see what this is doing. It's going to go through it once, and then it's going to go through and shatter the pieces that have already been shattered once more. So it's going to like do another level of subdivision, not like a subdivision surface, but another level of dividing the pieces into smaller pieces, if that makes sense. So now, if I bring this out, remember I've got effect only locations on, median point, and I'm just scaling it up. That's just S. So now if I look at this, we've got, if we compare these two results, you can see in this one, we've got now some of those pieces are now shattered into even smaller pieces, and we're getting even smaller fragments mixed in with that. And so this is really fun if you want like really, really intricate, just really complex results like this. And but there's even more we can do with this. And that, I changed one button there, and that gave us a different result. So let's see what else we can do. Let's go back to here. So quick effects, cell fracture. And I think I want to turn that up even once more. And when you start doing that, this actually won't look different if I turn it up once more, because our clamp recursion is at 250. That means that the maximum number of objects that it'll separate into is 250. If you turn this up a lot, it's going to get laggy, but I might turn it up just a little bit. Let's do like 350 or something. You don't really need to do that. It'll look kind of the same. If I do that, let's just see what this looks like. Now, remember, I have 2 levels of recursion on this one. So those pieces that it subdivides into smaller pieces, it'll actually break it down 1 level even further, and it'll divide those into even smaller pieces. So the higher that number is, the recursion number, the longer it's going to take, the laggier it's going to be, the more pieces you're going to have. It's going to be a bigger mess, but the results could be cooler depending on how it looks. With this, just subdividing or with just fracturing 1 sphere, it's not going to give you so many pieces that it's going to lag your computer right away. But if you start doing this a lot, it's going to be a bit messy. So let's look at this. So you can see the higher that recursion, the more intricate it's going to be. And you can see how turning that up gives us more and more intricate results. So something I want to do is now, I've seen renders of people using this kind of technique, except they have it so that there's kind of sections of really big chunks and then also sections of really small chunks. And so what I want to do is try and get that. If I go back into this menu really quick, quick effects, cell fracture, you'll notice that there is this section down here of cursor, like there's these 2 options here, cursor close and cursor far, or like random, small, big, cursor close, cursor far. This has to do with like where it places that recursive shatter. So I actually want to try out this setting here, cursor close, and I want to have it shifted to one side so we get like a nice section of small chunks and a nice section of really big chunks. So what I want to do is, let's put the cursor on top so it's not directly in the middle. It's kind of on the top here, so just shift right click to move this thing around. I'm putting it right there. That's the cursor. And let's go back into here, object, quick effects, cell fracture, and let's turn this to cursor close. I might turn this down to 250 because we don't need that many. And then let's just leave the recursion how it is on 2, and then cursor close, and let's see what that does. So my goal is to have it fracturing smaller and smaller pieces closer to the cursor, and then leaving the rest of those as kind of bigger chunks. So let's see if it can do that. So just remember, the higher that recursion number, the more it's going to divide it into smaller and smaller pieces. So just be careful with it. Let me just hide this original sphere. And it looks like it did what I wanted. So it's got closer to the cursor now. It was kind of doing that before a little bit at the top, but it also had some areas at the bottom and stuff. Now, when I set it to be cursor close, it's pretty much only giving us those smaller levels of division close to where the cursor was placed. And if I were to place the cursor on the bottom, it would do the same thing just around here. So that's useful on other objects than a sphere, because a sphere is going to be the same everywhere. But you can imagine how that would be useful if you're shattering some other object that isn't symmetrical on every side. Okay, so I think that's enough of the settings. Let's talk about how to actually deal with this. And using this setting, you're kind of making a mess over here. So let me show you how to clean this up. The way I like to do it is, once I have something that I like, I'll just select all the pieces, and then let's put the cursor around this thing. So I'm just going to hit Shift S, cursor to selected, and that'll just put the cursor in the middle of this roughly. Kind of just position it where it needs to be roughly. It doesn't really matter. And what I'm going to do is add an empty. So just Shift A, empty, and then I'll just pick sphere because that looks like it would make the most sense. And I'll just scale that up. I'm going to turn off the setting, affect only locations, so I can actually scale this. And I want to have this here so that I can just parent all these loose parts to one object to move it around easily. So I'll just select all this stuff, make sure I select the empty last, and then Control P for parent, and then just this one here, object, keep transform. And now I can still move all these pieces around individually and like mess around with it, but when I move this empty, all of those pieces will follow. The other thing I want to do, just to clean this up over here, is just select all those and just move it to a collection. So just M, move to collection, just call it cell or whatever, it doesn't matter. And now in here, we can kind of just find this collection, collapse this under the empty, and now we've got this thing right here. If you want to select all of the pieces, you can just right click the collection and press S, and then you've selected all of them. Yeah, so I'll just kind of move these to another collection, just call this extra, just so it's out of the way, because I don't like having a million pieces in here. Okay, so let's talk about how to actually manipulate this into a cool shape now. So if I turn on proportional editing, This is really good for being able to manipulate the shape of a bunch of loose objects or loose pieces together in a nice way. So if I turn on, if this setting is off, proportional editing, when I move one piece around, it's just going to move that one piece. But as soon as you turn this on, when you get this, you'll see you get this kind of like circle around where you're selecting. What that means is it's going to affect other objects within that radius of that circle. So if I move this around, I'm just pressing G to grab, and when you scroll in and out with this, you've probably used proportional editing. I probably don't need to explain how this works, but just in case you don't know, this is what it's doing. Now you can really just grab one piece and manipulate the shape kind of however you want in any cool way. And what happens is if you turn on this setting, affect only locations, remember what that does. Like if I turn that off and I scale it, it's going to actually do scaling with proportional editing on. It's going to scale relative to this thing I have here, right? If that's off, it's going to do this, just one. Turn it on, it's going to scale things close to this object. But if I turn on affect only locations, I can still scale it, but it won't actually affect the scale. It'll only affect the location of things. And so that's how you can explode this outwards if you want, or there's so much cool stuff you can do by having something in the, by scaling it around one object like this with affect only locations. So this is one of my favorite ways to manipulate the shape of the cell fracture result. And there's other ways to do this too. Like you could set this to random up here, and then when you scale it, it's going to be a completely random distribution, how that works there. Or, there's all these different fall offs that you can use. Or you can just leave it in a sphere. It doesn't really matter. But basically just get that into some kind of cool shape. Like you can see in the ones that I showed you in the beginning. There's, I think I started with a longer cylinder type shape, and then did a cell fracture, then kind of exploded the middle, and then that's something you can do. Or do it with a totally different shape, like a big, triangle or something. Or this could be anything you want, really. There's so much you can do with this, but let me show you how to actually light this nicely now, because you can see something you might try if you want to make it glow is you'll probably try doing this, like turning up the emission. And you can see, if I just select all of this and just Control L material to link material, that will give us kind of what we want. But then as soon as I start turning this up, it's going to be fully just white and not really look that cool. So the way you get this glassy kind of result, if you notice here, it's kind of half glass and half emission. The way you do that, I'll show you right here, is we want to have the outside emissive, the edge of it emissive, but then the middle chunk facing the camera, we want that to be glass. And there's a really easy way to do that. If I were to make this just pure glass, let me show you what that would look like. So I'll turn the emission off, and I'll just add a single point light in here just for demonstration. Let's put this right here, and I'll just turn this up to something. And we'll just kind of put that right there. And so now if I turn up the emission is off right now, 0. But if I turn up the transmission and turn down the roughness a little bit, that's how you get that glass type material. And if I start taking a noise texture and I run that into the roughness to get variation in how rough things are, let's turn up just detail up, roughness up a little bit, and then color ramp. You can see that's how you get that kind of grungy look on this glass crystal type material. That's how you do that. But I also want it to be emissive. But if you can see, if I turn up the emission, it's not really doing what I want. So the way you handle this is you can take a layer weight or a Fresnel node. It's kind of the same thing, really, just a little bit different results, a different way it calculates it or whatever, but pretty much the same. And I can just plug one of these. If I just look at what this is doing, you can see that if you notice, as I move the camera around, pay attention to one of these, for example. When I move the camera so that the edge is kind of lined up a certain way with the camera, those edges will get brighter, but as soon as it's facing the camera, it'll get darker. And so that's really useful for if we want the edges to be glowing and the middle to be glass, we can use that to drive the emission strength. So let's just run that in there. And I might need to tweak this a little bit to figure out a value that works. So something like there might be cool. So I want to have it actually pretty dark in the middle, but pretty bright around the edge, like that. And so you can see, yeah, that's kind of what I want. And then we can actually take a color ramp from here, drop it in there, and dial in the exact range we want this to be at. So I might just crunch that a little bit. Let's take a math node and then just drop that in here, change this to multiply. And what I want to do is multiply this because the output from the color ramp is going to be a maximum of 1. You can actually turn this up here if you want, but it's just easier to deal with the math node. So let's turn that up. There we go. And I might tweak this a little bit, tweak the blend a little, and just figure out a nice, cool value that's going to work for this. So that's kind of nice. I might actually use the facing and just see what that looks like. Not really what I want. So anyways, that's just running into the emission strength. So where this becomes cool is you can set this color to whatever you want. So you can make it red or orange or blue or whatever. What I like to do sometimes to get really complex results is you take some kind of texture. So I'll go to my Unsplash folder, and let's just take any weird image or just something with a complex texture on it. I'll just take that and drop it in here. So again, that's just from unsplash.com, free stock photo website. Oops, don't go there. And I'm going to run this into the color of this emission. And now we're getting variation in the color as well. Let me actually, let's take some volumetrics here. Let's just take a cube, scale that up, display as bounds, new texture on there, delete this, volume scatter, run that in here, 0.01, 0.7, just basic volumetrics, scroll in and out. I'm going to take this light and delete it because that's bugging me. And then on this, I might actually turn it up to like 0.02 or something. And then we can take this and just crank up the value to like 20 or something. One thing I need to do here, I forgot, is turn up the volumetric light bounces. There we go. And so, yeah, I can just swap this for any other image, or this might not be unwrapped. I might just do a quick cube projection. So let me just take this, just quickly unwrap it with a cube project, see what that looks like. And I can move this around on the UV map too. Like I can just put it into one spot if I want, if I think there's going to be a cool location here. So like that is kind of interesting. Or let me just turn off overlay so you can actually see what I'm doing here. Just moving this around to find like some cool spot, or maybe just switch out the texture entirely. Like let's try this wood thing here. This reminds me of like the old iPhone background. That might be cool. Or maybe let's switch it out for this leaf or something. At this point, you can really do whatever you want. You could just have it as one solid color. That might look really cool. Or, you know, create some weird intricate pattern on the color. But you can really do anything from this point. And then, you know, you use the proportional editing and like get all these crazy shapes. There's so much stuff you could do with this. You can mix in other shapes on top. You can duplicate this entire thing, join it together, create copies of it, scale it down. Like there's really so much you can do with it. It's just about trying stuff, getting creative, play with the different self-fracture settings, play with like the recursion, play with the noise. You know, try different objects, try shattering familiar objects, or try shattering weird abstract objects, or just you know, try different materials. Like you could do a metallic version of this, or there's endless variables, and that's what's so fun about this is you can get cool stuff by doing so many different things to this. Hopefully, what I've showed you here is just like a starting point for something cool that you can make. And yeah, like I said, I would encourage you to try different ways of using the methods of you know, stuff I'm showing you here, and get something unique and creative, and just try stuff and experiment. You could put this in like any environment too, like I've showed you. Like these are where I find this really fun is placing this weird abstract thing into like a human-made environment. There's just so much fun stuff you can do with this. I'm going to stop this video now, but anyways, hopefully that gives you some ideas. I don't know what else to say. I'll see you around. Bye.